Hey guys, thanks for joining us for episode 10. We've got a very special episode for you. It's all about the Super League today. So that's the new thing in European soccer, and we'll have Tong kind of explain what's all going on over there.
Sure. So the original idea for it was basically to get all the top clubs in Europe, soccer clubs, and put them in their own separate league. So it was going to be 20 clubs with 15 being permanent, and then had 12 confirmed teams, basically removing themselves from the Champions League, and they were going to play weekdays and then be in their domestic leagues on the weekends. Um, and it was going to be this huge financial backing from like JP Morgan. There was going to be huge TV deals to be negotiated. They were going to give all the founding clubs like 3.5 billion euros just for joining. They were going to split that among each other, and a prize fund of like 2.5 billion. So the money involved would have been nuts. But there was a lot of backlash because it goes directly against pretty much everything soccer in Europe has stood for decades. So it ultimately didn't happen. And we'll kind of talk about why we think, and the effects it would have had, and it's going to still have. But
Yeah, so basically, I guess last week now the co-chairs came out and announced that the Super League was starting, and they were really excited about it. And as Tong kind of mentioned, just the overall financial backing of this thing was crazy. It was 2 to 3 times more money these teams would earn than they do in Champions League, which is already ridiculous. And I think that was the overall appeal. I mean, what just the amount of revenue these clubs could generate from the Super League was ridiculous, don't you think, Tong?
yeah, and I think that's why I think all these big clubs really thought, hey, we're the ones who are driving most of the interest and making the most amount of money for these leagues. We deserve to be compensated for that reason. And I think all these clubs is kind of, we're only thinking it from the greed point of view in terms of we can make even more money from this than we already do as owners. Who cares if people don't like it? This is what we think is best for the club. And we basically, it was a power play. Like, hey, we have all the power. These domestic leagues need us because of the interest that it provides to everyone. Let's just take our ball and go to the Super League, basically. Um, and that would have been, I don't know, that would have been it's one of those things that we've heard about for years and years, but it's never really seemed like something that would come to fruition. And all of a sudden, it just was announced one day. Like, I basically woke up to the news essentially, and that would have just had devastating impacts to really all the leagues below the Prem too, as well as Bundesliga and all those. So
Yeah, it would have been detrimental, I think, to all those leagues. And what's funny is you mentioned everything was kind of based around greed and just looking at it only from a financial perspective. And a good portion of the ownership was American owners. I think they looked at the NFL and they looked at the MLB and the NBA as kind of maybe their source of inspiration for this kind of stuff, where basically the sole purpose of those teams is in America is to make money. They're a business, and I think you hear a lot of players talk about it that way, and they understand that it's a business. But I think there are stronger ties and different values in Europe, and I think the owners kind of found that out the hard way. I think they unveiled this thing and expected the fans to be on board right away, and the amount of backlash they received instantly was amazing. It was phenomenal.
it was unanimous pretty much. I think they expected it from certain fan groups, and I think they expected people to be mad on Twitter and stuff like that because people always are. But it was not just them. It was coaches of the top clubs who were going to be in the league who you would think it would benefit. It was players. It was immediate protests at stadiums the day after. It was pretty unified. Everyone basically was turning on these clubs overnight. Like, there were people ready to ditch their clubs and support the local league.
Yeah, so I think this might be like the only time you ever see a United fan and a Liverpool fans and Arsenal fans and Chelsea fans all going, for the same motion. Nobody wanted this league to happen, and I think that just shows, how opposed these fans were. And I think the traditions in European soccer go back way longer than any of us were around, and I think just a lot of the signs and protests I saw were built by the poor and taken by the rich, which kind of symbolized, when these clubs started, it was just like an after work thing, and there wasn't much to go off, and now they've built this into like the Premier League, especially they've built it into one of the best leagues in the world, and it's already extremely profitable. It just shows how greedy these owners were, because they needed more money in their pockets.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where a United fan didn't want to see it happen, because even though United's rich, they still have to earn it to some degree. Like maybe it's not as hard compared to a West Brom, but they still have to qualify and get in. And this was literally going to be just a closed system where they can automatically make it every year. They're not even going to have to worry or care about the FA Cup or the Prem. They can just play their backups, make sure they stay in the league because they don't care about the league anymore, just not get relegated. And then, they can just focus on the midweek games against Barcelona. But I think too, a lot of the appeal of the Champions League is being able to watch a game you don't often see. So like, it's not every day you watch Juventus Bayern or whatever, but if that happened often in a league like this, I really do think it would take away the appeal, and it wouldn't be, it'd just be like any other league at that point. It wouldn't even feel like a super league. It just feel like the league. And I think that ruins a lot of I don't know, what makes the game special.
It also it eliminates the underdog factor, because with all of these massive clubs automatically in this competition every year, and there's only 5 spots left, and you got to figure those were going to the next basically 5 biggest clubs that were decently successful throughout the season. It takes away those special runs that you see where different clubs who don't always have a lot of money, or they sneak into Champions League and maybe they win a few games and there's like a Cinderella story type deal going on. It takes away all of that fun. And I think another thing that's appealing to me about Champions League is theoretically you could have an entirely new new team base from year to year. Like no one's guaranteed that they're going back, and I think that's awesome. I think it's kind of like the NCAA tournament. You see teams like Duke and Kentucky. They're everybody assumes they're locks at the year, but this year they weren't, and I think that like even the blue bloods have to earn it, like you said, and I think that's something that's cool and interesting about the Champions League and what makes it unique.
It really would have decimated the Prem too, and every other league that participated. But I mean, you think of Everton or Leicester; those teams are able to pull together a roster, and now they're able to spend money with these TV deals. And if now you'd have a player like, I don't know, Vardy, let's say, as an example. If you had a Vardy who had to decide between, hey, he's getting Super League offers where he's going to make triple the amount of money and everything, or he can stay with his club that in a league that is losing power day by day because they're not being watched as much and everything. It basically makes the Prem the championship, and it's all going to trickle down from there, where it's just a lot, less of a thing less of a thing to watch. And I think like 20 years from now, maybe players stick with it these days, but I think 20 years from now, someone growing up be like, yeah, I'll just join the Super League. Like this, the old system doesn't mean anything to me. I'm young enough, whatever. And I think it would have really kind of killed the game in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the wages that those teams that were locked into the Super League, the amount of wages those teams would have been able to pay, no other teams could have matched that. Just purely on, even if they didn't win a single game in the Super League, just the amount of money they get from just being a part of it would have guaranteed that their salaries would have been way more than any other team could offer, which just once again ruins the game. And like there is some of that now where certain teams obviously have more money and can buy certain things, but just to the point, it would exacerbate that to an unfathomable level. It'd just be, I don't know, it would have ruined the game, like you said, and it just hurts all those smaller clubs.
And like, I don't know, I joke about how I want United to get Haaland for however much money we can this summer, and whether that's 500 million or whatever. I mean, if those TV deals went through and all that money they were going to get, like he'd actually go for 400 million. Like the disparity would be even greater than normal, and it is now. Like the Real Madrid president was saying how this was going to basically help the entire game, help the grassroots game everywhere, and that it's needed because even rich teams right now are losing a ton of money because of COVID and things like that. But there's just no way that would have trickled down past 20 or 30 clubs in Europe. There's just no way. And it just felt kind of sleazy that they were doing it during a pandemic too, where people can't voice their opinions as much as easily at stadiums and stuff. And it felt like they were just kind of capitalizing on it to me.
Right. And I do think that the COVID financial issues may have sped up the process of them announcing this and releasing it because they're looking for new ways to generate money, but that's not really an excuse. These are billionaires that are owning the clubs. Like they still have money.
Right. What I don't get is like they've talked about this for years now, and they had to know there was going to be backlash, and this wasn't like an overnight thing in terms of the details and the legal work and everything. So it still shocks me that this ended so quickly. Like when it was announced, I figured this was going to be a months long drawn out thing. And I figured it'd probably go through, but I definitely didn't think they would cave. Like the most powerful people in the game in terms of money and owning clubs, I didn't think they'd cave after 3 days. And I still don't really understand why in some ways. Like I know the backlash was big, but it wasn't any bigger than I thought it would be. Like it was exactly what I expected. I just thought that they would wait for people to be outraged, wait for that to be over, and then just be like, all right, we're doing it, you know?
Yeah, it was crazy at just how quickly it collapsed. Like it started as like a few teams were like, we're out. And then all of a sudden, like everybody was out. And to me, like you said, they're the ones that proposed the idea. So they should have been prepared for this backlash. They should have been like, they should have thought through some scenarios like if this happens, then we're gonna counter with this, or like vice versa. Whereas like so like FIFA and UEFA and those guys should have been the ones that were caught off guard, but it almost seemed like those roles were reversed. Like they just expected everything to go so smoothly and there would be no backlash.
Yeah. Well, they didn't even propose it. They just said, we're doing it. And they posted generic responses on websites and on Twitter. And then they saw that it was not a good reaction. So then people who weren't really in it, they just kind of bailed. Like City and Chelsea, they didn't really want to do it as much. They didn't have as much like power at the table. So they're like, we'll just get out of here. But I don't know. It's just crazy that and now, I mean, just talk about, whether there's going to be punishment to these teams. And I'm for that, but we'll see if it happens. But, it just felt like, and there was talk at one point about them canceling the Champions League, just giving it to PSG since they didn't join. And what a way to win the Champions League if you're Neymar. You finally get one, but it's by default because 3 other teams branch off into their own Super League.
Trophy.
I mean, yeah, it is.
So let's kind of talk about like why we think maybe it failed so quickly. Like what are your thoughts behind, just what went wrong for them?
Well, I think from what I've seen, there were 4 or 5 teams who really wanted it in terms of their board. So like Real Madrid's guy was Florentino Perez. He was at the heart of it. The Juventus guy, Agnelli, was at it. And then like Liverpool United, those teams seemed like they were really pushing it. And if you look at it, they were the chairman like they were going to be the board of this new Super League. And I think they were trying to be the ones to corral everybody into this league. And I think a lot of these teams didn't want to be left behind. And they didn't necessarily really want to be in it. And not to give them a pass because they still decided to join, But and if you're a team like Arsenal or Tottenham, where you can make a good argument they didn't even deserve to be in it in the first place compared to other teams in terms of, recent success. I think if you already have all those doubts and you don't even know if you should really be in it in the first place, it's a lot easier for you to like drop out. But yeah, it is really weird to me that it was done after 3 days. Like I don't have a great answer for it, but the most recent comments from the Real Madrid president are that it's still a legally binding contract that they signed and that it's not over and that this is just suspended. So, I mean, I don't know how full of crap he is, but it wouldn't surprise me if in a year from now they try something again. Maybe not the same clubs. Maybe it's a different mix of clubs. It would look really bad for the Liverpool club or for the Liverpool owner if he announces that they're doing it again after he posted a long "I'm sorry" video on Twitter. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think part of the reason it failed is timing. So what FIFA countered with was, hey, anybody who plays in there isn't going to be able to play in the Euros or internationally. So if they roll this out 2 years from now after the World Cup, maybe players aren't as hesitant to join or play because, hey, there's 4 years for us to figure this out, and by the time that the next World Cup comes around, it'll all be fine. Whereas now the Euros are looming in a couple months, and like the impact would have been immediate. Whereas I think maybe if they roll it out after the World Cup, then there's more time where things can kind of get figured out. But FIFA just laid down the law right now and said, hey, they're not going to be able to play in this and this, and UEFA was kicking them out of the Champions League, and I think timing was part of the issue.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know if like it was an empty threat by the leagues and by FIFA if they were actually going to bar them from international competition. But if it is, it's a really good empty threat. Like there's nothing like you can't tell me Pulisic wouldn't want to play for the United States just because he's playing for Chelsea. And you could say that about a lot of players. Maybe some wouldn't care, but I just got to believe a lot would. And I think too, maybe it had to do with teams that decided not to join. So PSG declined, Bayern declined, I think Dortmund declined.
Yep.
And I think there were a few others too that were asked. And not that was like they still went through with trying to do the league, but I think having those really big clubs not join maybe was part of it. And maybe it's like, okay, these rich clubs are saying not to, we don't have, maybe this is not the right move. I saw an interesting theory about PSG and that they're owned by the Qatari group, and they've used PSG to kind of like flex a little bit, and they have the World Cup coming up.
Right.
So maybe like, why would they want to join this Super League, and then in turn all those players are banned from the World Cup, and so then they can't. They've gone through this whole thing of building stadiums. Now they can't even use the stadiums to like have the best players.
Right. That's a good point. I think, yeah. There's just so many. I think for me, I would have liked to see it go on a little bit longer and kind of see, who would be the first one to cave. Like, obviously we know the Super League was the first one to cave, but like it happened so quickly, like it wasn't even fun. Like
FIFA, right, you want to see the world burn a little bit.
It was like the little brother that came up to the older brother and was like, give me your sandwich, and the older brother just shoves his head into the couch and said no. Like right. It was over.
Well, we were talking about when we're going to do this episode, and I was like, oh, we don't have to rush it or anything. Like this will be a thing. This will change the sport forever. It'll be like around for a while. And then literally the next day, maybe not even the next day, I don't even know, but it was like, okay, the Super League's not happening anymore. It's like, well, like it just, I don't know. It's crazy how it like happened like that.
Right. It was just like immediate smackdown by FIFA. And I think what they did was they put the pressure on the players, which was smart to me, because, the owners don't really care. I mean, they only really care about their club team. And so there wasn't really a way to punish them outside of kicking them out of Champions League, which that only affects 3 of the clubs. Whereas if you target the players, which FIFA did, if all of the players revolt or refuse to take the pitch, like the teams can't play. And so that then hurts the clubs. So by targeting the players, they found a way to potentially hurt the clubs if they would have continued, which I think was very smart on FIFA's.
And I think it helps now that all these players and coaches are on record for not liking it now. Because like I saw the quote from Klopp in 2019, maybe something like that, where it was like, I'm not a fan of the Super League and I don't think it's a good idea. And then that was brought up to him this time around, like, hey, are you still like, is that still your opinion? Well, I think that's going to be, if this does happen again, a lot of coaches and players are going to be on record for being like, hey, it'll look really flip-floppy if, you go back on your word like that. So it'll be interesting to see if any owners step down or if anything happens to these clubs in terms of point deductions or anything like that.
Yeah, it will be interesting. But like you said, like Klopp said no. Pep said something along the lines of, is it really a competition if you don't have to qualify for it? Like, is it really a sport? And I think when guys like that speak out and say that it's a bad idea, like those are some of the brightest soccer minds in the game. Like something obviously isn't right. And it had to do, and obviously they're thinking about it more from a soccer perspective than, whereas the owners are just thinking more financially, which I think there's probably a healthy balance in there somewhere. Like Champions League may need to reform, which they kind of are doing a little bit. There's some things that are changing. So maybe the Super League doesn't actually happen, but it leads to changes in the way that, Champions League and Europa League are done.
Right. Well, I think that like a lot of the changes in the last few years have kind of led to a more Super League kind of approach. Like if you look at the new Champions League format, it's kind of more like this. It's closer to the Super League than it was before. So like it's not the Super League, it's not that drastic, but it felt like the Super League like just took it to the extreme right away, and people, the smart move from them would have just been to slowly incrementally change things until it's like almost kind of a Super League, and then it'd be an easier switch almost. But
because it was just like there was no gradual, easing the fan base into it. It was just one morning. Oh yeah, by the way, we're making this Super League, and you guys are gonna like it. When in reality, they didn't like it, and here we are.
I think what they didn't expect too is that the politicians in Europe to hate it. So there were reports of like, or at least quotes from English politicians saying like this is terrible for the game, and it makes sense. Like, I mean, if you're looking for something popular to say, it's going to be coming out against the Super League, and it's going to hurt the bottom line in all these cities. So
the Queen of England herself stepped in and said, to the Big Six, you can't go to that Super League, not until I'm dead, and that's not going to be for a while. She had to come out of Buckingham Palace and lay down the law for that one.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think they could have held on longer. I still am a little baffled by that, but I do think it was funny. The Man United president or something like that, Ed Woodward, he stepped down at once we left the Super League. He stepped down, and he said it was out of protest for the Super League. That was a report, which is obviously a bunch of nonsense because he didn't protest it until they dropped out, and it was obviously just falling on his sword. But that made it worth it for me that at least this guy who'd been terrible for the club, at least he left because of it. So I'm down to do the Super League again and have this happen for 3 more days again.
So there are some small victories for the folks out
there. I wonder if it probably wasn't linked, but literally the day that it was announced the Super League, Mourinho was fired from Tottenham. And I just think that's hilarious. Like right before a cup final that he could have won, just fired.
Right.
So I don't know, like if that was supposed to be a distraction or what.
So, with the ending of the Super League, and there are talks about punishments, are there any that you deem or you've seen that you think are fair, or what do you think might happen to these clubs that decided to, join the Super League?
What I think will happen is maybe there's like some transfer bans handed out, or like there's some sort of, I think there'll be a punishment. I don't think there can be no punishment. I don't really think it'll be as big as some people are hoping. Like I've seen calls for, and from big name pundits too, I've seen people called for like relegating the teams or deducting points and things like that, or taking away trophies. I don't know that it's going to come to that. And maybe that's another reason why people ditched this really quick, because they didn't want to face these punishments and then have it not happen. But I mean, personally, I'd be fine with seeing United get a points deduction or something drastic. Like it's really unfair because the fan didn't do anything, the player didn't do anything, the coach didn't do anything. It's literally just, like 12 billionaires who like impacted all of it. But I mean, you got to do something. Like there's got to be some sort of punishment. Otherwise, they're just going to do it again, and then we're back at the same spot.
Right. And I that's a good point, as I think something needs to happen. I don't know what that's going to be. And like you said, it's probably not going to be anything drastic. But what I also think is funny is that the Super League might punish them for leaving. There's talks about, well, they're going to have to pay fines because they broke the contract. Well, who are those fines going to? Because everybody else is out of the league. So it's just going to be like Real Madrid and Barcelona, and Juventus maybe.
And Juventus, yeah.
So the three of them are just going to split the fees, the fines, and just go on our merry way. So I think that's funny that the one thing that is going to punish, they're going to get punished for joining the Super League, and they're also going to get punished for leaving the Super League. So I think that's hilarious, which could deter them from a Super League starting again. If the chairman of the Super League is going to hold them to these contracts, and that could ruin some relationships, and that could be the detriment of something like this down the line.
Yeah. And I saw each club loses like 8 to 9 million or something in sunk marketing fees. So just participating in this and going through the motions lost them money, which I think is pretty funny. I think that's not a great look for these clubs who are now playing like basically everybody's rooting against these clubs for now on until like the foreseeable future in any game. And once you finally do get fans back at these games, like every chance going to be about, like
Make
they're
their
gonna be
own.
1-0 down to Watford, who just got promoted, and they're gonna be chanting, Super League, something about Super League, and it's gonna be
There might even be chants from the own fans, like our owner's a wanker, like all this stuff.
yeah,
Like the banter potential is unreal coming up and when the stands are full.
yeah, very frustrating, very. But I'm as a Leicester fan, are you happy that this isn't happening, or
Oh,
were you mad you weren't invited?
no, because I was opposed from it from the start. Like I'm glad it didn't happen because that would have ruined Leicester. They're like basically it ruins anyone who wasn't in the Super League, and especially Leicester who's found some success in the last couple of years. Like they've been at the top of the table. They blew Champions League last year, but they're sitting third right now. Like they're they've performed better than Arsenal and Tottenham in those squads in the last couple of years, which is frustrating because those teams got invited to the Super League because they're supposed to be the best when in reality, they're just the biggest. And so I think from that standpoint, it was frustrating, but also at the same point, they didn't understand that their effects, the big clubs didn't understand the effects that it would have had on the smaller clubs. They were just looking selfishly and kind of, we were on the outside looking in at just all the revenue and Leicester already has a problem retaining their players. Like once they get decent, somebody else buys them. Like if the Super League would have happened, Arsenal might have just bought all of Leicester's team and we'll just swap teams. Like
Right.
there's just stuff like that would have just been so frustrating that there's nothing they could have done to change it.
And this is a theory, but I tend to believe it wouldn't have stopped at the Super League either. So, it wouldn't have surprised me to see them add other big clubs eventually or big clubs from other countries. So like it wouldn't surprise me to see Inter Miami in 20 years in the Super League, and then they make it like a global Super League. And then you have games where it's like Juventus versus Barcelona and I don't know, in like Detroit, not Detroit, but like all around the world, basically Australia's, Korea,
So
and
use
then it really takes like the regional aspect out of things where it's like not even it's really just
it's like a touring thing.
yeah, it's like not even Liverpool anymore. It's just like the team called Liverpool. Like it's just like a globetrotter situation where it's like they go around. It's like the International Champions Cup, where they all come to
Right.
America for some games, for some friendlies. I feel like it would have turned into that. And that's not really based off anything, but I feel like if they did this, why wouldn't they? Why
Right.
wouldn't they do that?
So my question is, if you're a Leicester or you're those next clubs, you're an Everton, what's the rebuttal from you? Do you make a Super League Junior, a decent league, like to make money? Like how do you counter that?
If it would have happened.
Yeah, like what's the rebuttal? Or you just take it on the chops and you do whatever you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they would have done. I mean, Everton at least would have probably been in a situation where they could win the Prem a lot and compete for these trophies.
Well, what
I
does
don't know. I don't know how they could like create their own. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe they could create their own super league, but like I don't know how they would do that.
I don't know that
It's a
there's
good
a right
question.
answer, but like I feel like those clubs they would have had to change something to survive because the Super League would have just absorbed everything, all the money from everywhere. Because like you said, they could have won the Prem, but what does winning the Prem then get you? If there's no Champions League, if there's no like
Right.
you maybe get an invite to the Super League where you're playing teams who have wages that are incredibly higher than what you're able to pay. Like
Yeah. I mean, there's a chance too that Super League would have failed. Like maybe it wouldn't have had the interest that people expected, and it could have been something that they bit off more than they chewed, and so then they couldn't really like they put all this money into it, and then all of a sudden the TV ratings aren't what they expect, and people kind of hate it, and maybe there's a resurgence in like the grassroots game for your local club, or maybe people are still watching NBCSN in America and they're watching the Prem. They're not watching the Super League. Like I really don't think I would have watched the Super League that much, and I love watching these teams, but I think realistically, like I would have watched Man United because it would have been hard for me to stop doing that. But I don't know that I would have really turned on Real Madrid, like AC Milan again, like on a Wednesday. I really don't know that I would have done that. And I think they were banking on that.
so for the average fan or like just the fair weather fan, I think the idea was great. Like Pat McAfee, who played soccer growing up, he doesn't know a lot about it, but he put out some tweet like, "This is the greatest thing ever." And once he kind of learned more about it, because he's just like, "Wow, I'm gonna see Barcelona play Liverpool every week. This is amazing. These are just the clubs that if you don't really know soccer, you know the clubs." He's like, "I'm gonna see these teams play every week. This is amazing." And then once you start to dig into it, then you understand that the diehard fans are against it and everybody else is against it. And I think just the average fan was like, this is amazing, but I think everybody else was just against it, which I don't think they expected, which was cool.
Right. But and then if you're thinking about a Pat McAfee or somebody like that, he's not going to watch the Super League that much more than he watches a regular soccer game. And so I think there was a potential for it to still bust, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, you might get those casual fans a little bit more. And there's so many soccer fans globally that maybe it can even out or it'd be a lot more, productive for you. But I just don't know that it would have really had the effect that they were hoping for. And then it would have been really funny to see in 3 years all these teams come crawling back to their domestic leagues and then them being placed in the third division, like, hey, you screwed us, now we're gonna screw you.
Right. Like take
But
it back.
that's where I agree with you, where it would be nice if like we could have seen what would happen. Like I'd love to see different timelines, but just not live out that timeline.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. Need some Doctor Strange stuff going on.
Right. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was they're creating a new European league on top of the Champions League and the Europa League. Like not the Super League, but it's a whole nother thing. So it's almost like it's called the Europa Conference League. And it just sounds like a mess because it's so if you have the Champions League, that's like March Madness, right? And then you have Europa League, that's like the NIT.
Yeah.
Well, now there's one below that. And so it's like teams who finish, I don't know all the details, but like finish seventh through ninth maybe in the Prem, and then like teams from really small European countries. So
So
they're really just milking everything they can out of
so
every team.
Arsenal's gonna make a tournament. That's good for them.
Maybe. I mean, what are they in right now? Eighth?
I don't know. I think they're right in that range.
Let's see.
They've got something to battle for.
They're in 10th. So I don't even know if they'd qualify for that. But if
Wow.
they're in the Europa League semifinals, so if they can
True,
win
true.
out, they'll get to Champions League. But
Very
yeah, I mean, I just feel like all these like organizations just want to milk these players from as many games as possible and trying to get, the most amount of money. Which I mean, it's a business, so I get it, but
but we are starting to see a little bit of backlash, like when the new Champions League format came out. Gundogan came out and was like, "Hey, like, are you kidding me? We got to play more games. Like, do you not understand? Like, that takes a toll on people's bodies, and like, it's not good for the player." Like, they come out and say, "Oh, more games is always good for the player," but in reality, there's a point where their bodies can't take it anymore, and it's not good for the player.
right. And I think it definitely flew under the radar. Like it was released right when the Super League was being released.
Genius.
Um, right. It was like, I mean, if you want to get conspiratorial about it, like, you could say they were in cahoots where it's like, okay, we can get this pass if we drop this bombshell of a terrible idea. But yeah, I mean, it's just gonna be way more games for them. And yeah, and I don't really like the new setup either. I don't know if we've talked about it, but it's like instead of having groups, you're gonna have like a giant table and you play 10 teams, and then based off how you rank in the standings, you then are seeded in like a playoff game kind of situation, and that gets you to the knockout round. And you don't play everybody, so it's not going to seem fair. I just don't like it. But
Right. And I think the groups is something that's unique to soccer. Like
yeah,
no other sport, like in the NBA playoffs, you don't get in a group of four and kind of battle it out to see who advances. Like I think that's something that soccer is unique about, and I think it's something that makes it special. Like the group stage in the World Cup is like the best time. Like I think the group stages is something that I think they're gonna find out that they miss more than they think.
yeah, I agree. Money grab.
That's what it all comes down to. Money talks. All right, Tong. So let's kind of wrap up our conversation here about the failed Super League, and let's kind of talk about maybe the implications that we see moving forward. What comes of this, or what kind of falls in the footsteps?
Well, what I hope happens is that all these supporters kind of stay motivated and they stay active and trying to keep their voices heard. Like if there was no backlash, none of this would have been canceled. And it's pretty clear this wasn't a popular proposal at all. Um, And I think if people get complacent and think this won't happen again, then they might be a little naive. And it might not happen for a while. It might not be successful again, but I gotta believe there's going to be some sort of new super league that tries to pop up down the line, or some proposal that is just not at all welcomed. Um, and I think if people think that it's going to just go away, that's probably not likely. Um, but what I hope happens is that the game just becomes more and more competitive. So obviously you have your rich teams, but I mean, the day that you can't have a Leicester type story, or you can't celebrate and know that it's meaningful for a team like Watford or Sunderland to get relegated again, something like that, or promoted again, the day that that dies, like, it loses a lot of interest for anybody who's paying attention to the game, really. So I think that's what I want to happen. I just wanted people to kind of keep it in mind and to follow it, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think as time passes, hopefully people don't forget about how the owners kind of try to steal the game from them, from a lot of teams. And I think it's still okay to be unhappy about this. I think a lot of times fans are forced to kind of go with what the owner said, but I think it proved, this whole thing, that fans do have some influence in what goes on. Like, essentially, fans pay the bills, right? We go to games, we buy jerseys, we do that kind of stuff. So we do have some influence. And I think it was cool to see, what masses amount of people can do and kind of influence. Um, as far as repercussions, I think a super league is going to happen at some point. I think what happened this time just kind of kicked it down the line again, kind of like you mentioned. I think this could have just been a test run, and they were planning to fold eventually too, because they just wanted to see how the reaction was going to take. Like, that's obviously dramatic, but it's not crazy, I guess, to kind of say that they just wanted to put out a feeler. Um, but yeah, I think fans have to back the club to with everything they have. But then when it's time to speak up, I think they did the right thing and do that. And also, I think the players need to remember that they also have a voice as well as the coaches. And I think that's the only way that you kind of keep those greedy owners at bay.
Yeah, and I'd also add, I'd love to see the owners removed in some way. I know that's not going to happen, probably not. But I mean, there are talks about the Spotify CEO
I saw
linking
that.
up with some Arsenal legends and getting the club. And I don't know if that's likely. It's probably not. But I'd be happy for Arsenal, even if that doesn't happen for United. I'd be happy if they were able to free themselves of that, because maybe this billionaire won't be better, but is a chance. Like, and there's not many people who can buy a club at this point in terms of a rich one like this. So I don't know. I'd love for there to be some sort of real repercussion for these owners. I'm not holding my breath, but I would love to see it happen.
Jeff Bezos is just going to step in and buy all the clubs in Europe. So I did see that he can buy like the top 20 and still have $1 billion left. So, like, that's pretty cool. So maybe
It
he'll
is
just make
cool.
his own super league.
It's terrifying, but it's kind of cool. I don't think I'm for that either, but
Yeah, so I think we've pretty much covered a lot of the ins and outs of the Super League, at least from our vantage point. To Americans just looking in from the outside. Um, you have any final words you kind of want to wrap up with, or you kind of hit all of it?
no. I was an Everton fan for about 26 hours. It was miserable. I'm glad to be back as a United fan for as long as I can be. That's all I got.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks. He was an Everton fan.
They hate Liverpool too, so
Only makes sense. I mean, you could
right.
have come to the Foxes.
I could have. I mean, in the end, I had to root against Jake Martin, and I will do that to the day I die.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this episode.
As there's a drive in a deep left field by Castellanos, it will be a home run. And so that'll make it a 4-0 ball game.
Don't forget, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and comment down below. Thanks, guys. Just workers after.